from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures. Endless red tape, as Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain. They've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Sunday. Happy Sunday afternoon. Hoping you're having a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining us this lunchtime. I'm Dawn Neeson, and for the next 2 hours, we're keeping you company on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, cracking show coming up. In the first hour, leaked documents have revealed that the British Army wants to relax security checks for recruits from overseas to boost diversity and inclusion. Marvellous. But should we be sacrificing national security for diversity? So stunned by that one, can't get the words out. Then former PM Bojo says if Rishi Sunak wants help winning the election, all he has to do is pick up the phone and ring him. But would Boris be enough to save the Tories? And nuclear power accounts for around a fifth of the UK's electricity generation. Waste from its production, though, is used in medicine, defence, industry and research. But where will we store the radioactive waste? One small town in Yorkshire could be used as a nuclear dumping ground. And you're not going to want this one. You're really not going to miss it. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is to appear exclusively on the GB News People Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that really matter most to you. Let's hear what he's got to say about it, shall we?
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
Wow, that's right. Tomorrow at 8 p.m, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. Over the course of that hour, he'll take questions directly from you, the great British public, the voters. He wants your vote, remember. But this show is nothing without you and your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we'll be talking about today and what you want to ask Rishi as well. Interested on that one. Email me at gbviews gbnews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials @gbnews. But let's get some of those news headlines, shall we? And here they are with the lovely Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you and good afternoon. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary is said to be furious over the Ministry of Defence's diversity and inclusivity policy. It's been reported in today's Telegraph that the Army wants to relax security clearance vetting for overseas recruits to boost diversity and inclusion. Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph that he's ready to go to battle over the matter and has ordered a review. He's warned there will be no lowering of security clearance requirements on his watch. According to the paper, the UK's armed forces are looking overseas because they've reportedly failed to hit recruitment targets. Fujitsu is said to have received more than £3.4 billion through contracts from Treasury-linked organisations despite its role in the post office scandal. The Commons Treasury Committee says Fujitsu was awarded around £1.4 billion worth of deals since the High Court ruling in 2019, concluding there'd been numerous failings in its Horizon IT system. £2 billion worth of contracts were also agreed before 2019 and remained active thereafter. A group of MPs wrote to organisations including HMRC, the Financial Conduct Authority and the Bank of England to demand details of their agreements with Fujitsu. The committee said all three have spent considerable sums with them. 2 people have been arrested after an 8-year-old child was seriously injured in a suspected XL bully attack. The dog had bitten the child's head in Merseyside yesterday afternoon. The boy has had emergency surgery and remains in a serious but stable condition. Doctors say his injuries are life-changing. Officers seized the dog, which they believe to be an XL bully. A 49-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man have been arrested. They're not related to the child. The Housing Secretary is warning young people shut out of the UK's housing market could turn to authoritarianism. Michael Gove says a failure by the government to tackle the housing crisis could harm democracy, as well as the Conservatives' chances at the general election. In an interview with The Times, he says the traditional route for young people to work hard and get on the housing ladder has gone. Gove criticised Labour for, he says, continuously rejecting housing policies.
The difference between a party saying that its policy is pro-builder, not blocker, and then when we bring things forward, every single Conservative MP, every single Conservative I know backed our proposals for new homes, and Labour were whipped to a man and woman against it. So this is not about individuals, this is about a party that makes big claims, and yet, as we see time after time, it turns turtle. And that's why Keir Starmer is the jellyfish of British politics. He's transparent, spineless, swept along by the tide.
Kwasi Kwarteng says immigration must be a key focus for the government when it comes to having success at the next election. The former Chancellor also told GB News' Camilla Tominey his decision to not stand for re-election as an MP is one he's been considering for a while now.
Thinking about it for a long time.
Have you? How long?
And there was, well, ever since the beginning of the Parliament, actually. I had thought, and I was Minister of State at that point, I had thought that, 3 terms, obviously we had more elections, but 15 years is probably, in this modern climate, a reasonable amount of time to be an MP. 2 of the principal things that Conservatives should be fighting for are lower taxes and secure borders, strong on immigration, and strong on taxes.
Well,
and
would
if you
you
look
like
at
to see an immigration cap?
Yes, I mean, there's got to be something on it. I mean, on 2 of those metrics, we haven't, frankly, performed very well.
No.
And the King has attended church in Sandringham for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty walked alongside Queen Camilla and waved to well-wishers. Last night, King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since the diagnosis announcement. The monarch said such kind thoughts are the greatest comfort and encouragement. Buckingham Palace has said he's facing a form of cancer unrelated to his recent prostate treatment. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Dawn.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Now, let's get straight into today's topics. We've got a cracking show lined up today. Now, leaked documents have revealed that the British Army wants to, I'm checking my notes here, relax security checks when we've got war going on in Europe for recruits from overseas to boost diversity and inclusion. I'm not making this up. The armed forces have consistently failed to hit recruitment targets and are looking overseas to boost ethnic minority representation. The leaked document outlines a series of actions to boost representation and describes security clearance vetting as being the primary barrier to non-UK personnel gaining a commission in the army. OK, so joining me now is Defence Editor of The Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Con, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful Sunday afternoon. Con, what do you make of the story?
Well, I mean, first of all, I find it very credible, given the way the government is treating our armed forces. We've had a series of scandals recently on the diversity issue. I think the first thing the new head of the Air Force had to do when he took up his post last year was apologise for the discriminatory policies that have been applied against white trainee pilots. So, I mean, this goes back a long way. But, you know, I think the government is in a terrible mess with our military. We do have a recruitment problem with all three services, as you've reported on GB News. So they're desperate to try and sort of get the numbers up, but this is not the way to go about it. The way to go about it is to get a proper recruitment process in place that gets the best recruits for these services to make them a credible fighting force and not to play around with these woke issues.
I mean, there are no figures about how much this latest recruitment drive is costing, Con. But it's the title, the British Army's Race Action Plan, right? OK. Now, I'm sure most people watching and listening today actually just want people who can do the job, regardless of their skin colour, their religion, their sex, their sexuality. Can they do the job to protect the country when we've been warned that we could, in theory, be 3 years away from a war with Russia?
Well, Dawn, as you can imagine, I've spent a lot of time with the military over the years, you know, in combat zones and elsewhere. And it's a very diverse, multi-ethnic organisation. I mean, set aside the fact we've got whole regiments like the Gurkhas that operate within the British Army. But if you go on operations with the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, they are diverse. They are multi-ethnic. There's a fair number of women now in senior roles. I don't know what more you need, but this smacks to say of a recruitment crisis, because the government, in its wisdom, has outsourced recruitment. It used to be done by the three services. Now we've got other bodies in charge of recruitment. They're failing miserably to meet their targets. And so I imagine the answer they come up with is, well, let's just lower the whole vetting process and just pick up anyone we can. Well, as you say, it's not good enough. You know, the threat environment is now greater than it's ever been in my lifetime. I mean, we've got some serious problems. We need a fighting fit military, and we need to get the best people into its ranks.
Con, why can't they see that? Why can't the government see this, right? OK, for only 5 are recruited for every 8 who leave the armed forces at the moment. And for the MOD to be fiddling around with stuff like this, when really, as you say, just get a recruitment post out there, get the right people in the job. And as for lowering security vetting, when we're on the verge of potentially, as I said, war in Europe, we've got the situation in the Middle East going on, and we've got scumbags like Abdul Azizi wandering around the country despite being a convicted sex attacker. Surely we need more security checks, but the right people doing the job.
Well, you're quite right, Dawn. I mean, and I don't know what the government's up to, but I mean, in the 14 years that the Conservatives have been in power, and remember, I write for a Conservative supporter newspaper, and I spent the last 14 years criticising successive defence secretaries and the government for the way it's treated the military, running down its numbers, running down its equipment programmes, and all these issues are now coming home to roost. And, you know, not only do we not have the kit, but we don't have the men and women to serve our country. And I don't know what they're playing at. And you get these platitudes from, the defence secretaries. I've forgotten how many I've dealt with now, but Grant Shapps is the latest one saying it's all fine and tickety-boo and we've got money. Well, this is nonsense. And we just need to wake up. And the other thing I would say quickly, and something your viewers might want to ask the Prime Minister when he does this town hall with you, he doesn't seem very interested in abroad. He doesn't seem very interested in defence. They run to Ukraine and make platitudes. But when it comes to providing the money and resources to give us that fighting edge, I don't see it myself.
Interesting point to end on. That's Colin Coughlin. Very much for joining us this afternoon, a defence editor of The Telegraph. Thank you very much. Now, let's see what my panel make of this. I'm joined today by political commentator Emma Webb and broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon. And the observant amongst you might spot, A, we're all female. We identify as female today, ladies? Yes, we are. And we're all wearing green. Varying shades of. And I've even got a green highlighter, which is frankly pathetic. Right, army green. Obviously, it's army green. Kind of. But there's a seamless link there. What do we... I'm going to come to you first on this one, Emma. What do you make of this report? I mean, it was in the Telegraph today, and I'm actually astonished by it.
I think people should be frightened,
yes.
Actually. And several former, now retired senior officers in the army wrote this letter to the Telegraph emphasising just how dangerous this is, particularly because intelligence officers, they have the access to the highest levels of secret assets. And if we're talking about lowering the vetting barrier to try and hire more people for the armed forces from abroad, just so that we can fill a diversity quota. Now, they're operating at about, I think it's 14%, which isn't far off the percentage of ethnic minorities in the population at large. And of course, if you're focusing on equality, diversity and inclusion, rather than focusing on as the point they made, which is that there is only one purpose that the army should have, and that is to be an effective and efficient fighting force. And this is undermining that. And I think also what this suggests is a really, really deep-seated cultural problem within the armed forces, that not only are they being sort of transformed into being thought of or thinking of themselves almost as a civil service rather than a fighting force. But it's also so commercialised, this idea that you would have people who are not British citizens, and you can have people serving the armed forces who are from Commonwealth countries if they live here for 5 years. So there are certain sort of restrictions on that, but they're talking about even wanting to get rid of those residency requirements. So it's treating the armed forces as if it's just some kind of company, rather than trying to create a culture in society at large where people want to fight for their country, to defend their country. That's the solution to recruitment in the long term, not hiring people from abroad and treating the armed forces like a business. I think it's dangerous, profoundly dangerous.
Claire, just hire people that can defend us, basically.
Well, the other issue is here that it's the outsourcing of the recruitment.
Yes, there is an issue here.
Is an issue.
Yeah.
A massive issue. Because as soon as you enter into any form of public-private partnership like this, then you have profit in front of anything that you can do.
This is true.
And for me, that's absolutely wrong, as is focusing on diversity, equality and inclusion, instead of getting the right people for the job, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, any political convictions. Get the people out that want to fight for the country, that have got pride in their country. Get them out there, get them armed up, and let's go and do it.
Especially as last month, I mean, the head of the British Army warned that Britain must prepare for conflict as the pre-war.
We're talking about conscription, remember?
Yes.
I mean, this is just an absolute anathema. It really, truly is.
It's, and servicemen, by the way, the ones that we do most recruit, servicemen are told they must complete mandatory unconscious bias training.
What a waste of time and money. I'm sorry.
Well, exactly.
What unconscious bias do you need when you pick up a gun and you're actually fighting
discipline in the army is not just in our armed forces, but it's about actually suppressing instincts and so on. So the other thing about this is that, trust is so important.
Yes, between your camaraderie,
Are you going to trust someone standing shoulder to shoulder, entering into a dangerous and mortally threatening situation, shoulder to shoulder with somebody who's there from abroad who simply sees it as a job?
Yeah.
I think that, the idea that they're having to undergo things like unconscious bias training is just a mad waste of time and money.
It is.
But also the fact that they're talking about making the remembrance services agnostic, getting rid of Christian elements. It's a complete absurdity that the civic rituals in this country do have a Christian heritage. That is not incompatible with being a tolerant and inclusive country to privilege those Christian roots. In fact, if anything, it's those Christian roots that are responsible for how tolerant we are as a country.
Well, this is the thing. I don't want people, they're trained to recognise microaggressions and warned not to misuse people's pronouns.
I'm sorry. In the
you're on the front line, OK?
Exactly.
Excuse me, you just
misgendered me.
I think this is, in terms of the culture of the armed forces as well, this completely undermines discipline because it's pushing people towards this more sort of individual,
laissez-faire narrative
outlook that's sort of emotionally incontinent, rather than creating the kind of stoicism and proper spirit of camaraderie that you need in the armed forces in order for them to be effective.
In every area of life, actually, to be honest with you. I think that sums it up, doesn't it? We move on from that debate. We're out of time. Thank you very much on that one. And now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and so much more, go to our website, gbnews.com. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson. Lots more coming up on today's show. Now, former PM Bojo says if Rishi Sunak wants help winning the election, all he has to do is pick up the phone and ring him. But would Boris have enough to save the Tories? Would anyone? All of that, much more to come. You're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far, though.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. And I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, 1 year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on your digital radio. Now, lots of you have been sending in your thoughts, which please do, because this show is all about you and what you are thinking on what we're talking about. So GBviews at GB News is how you get in touch, very simple. Lots of you are really getting wound up about the army diversity debate. OK, Adam says, good afternoon, Adam. I have served in the British military for the last 30 years and seen the numbers in constant decline. The government have attempted to address this shortfall by using reserves. Now, reserve units are having the budgets cut to pay for overspends elsewhere in the military. The recruiting process is suffering as a result, while the existing numbers, we couldn't defend London, let alone the UK. And that's from someone who serves. And a lot of you are picking up on that one. And Raymond says, the reason the army can't get many recruits is because of the way the social group where most recruits come from have been treated. That is white, working-class men. They see how vets are treated, end up in the streets, while illegal immigrants, those people crossing the channel, which is illegal, end up in five-star hotels. And a lot of you saying the same thing. Derek, good afternoon, Derek. The reason they can't reach recruitment targets is because they've excluded the majority of the white population. This is Great Britain. Strong views there, but what do you think? Do you agree with what those people are saying? Do you agree with what my panel is saying? GBviews at GB News is the way you get in touch. Now, before we move on, it's time for the Great British Giveaway. And you could win £18,000 in totally tax-free cash to spend however you like. Fancy the chance to make it yours? Well, here's how you do it.
We want to turn 2024 into 2020 more with your chance to win £18,000 in cash to spend however you like. You really could be the next big winner of our Great British Giveaway. Phil from West Yorkshire won our last one.
I never won a penny in my life.
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, wow.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Good luck. And both of my panellists, Emma and Claire, have got their phones at the moment, and I'm sure they're not entering because they're not allowed, but you are. So get going, get entering. It's a great
We're
prize.
not?
No, you're not. Right, now, the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, says that if Rishi wants any help from him in the election, all he has to do is give him a ring, you know, like they do on Strictly Come Dancing, isn't it? Conservative strategists want to deploy former PM on the campaign trail, despite a major fallout between the pair in 2023 over Mr Johnson's honours list. But if Rishi becomes too desperate, could we see Bojo on the campaign trail once more? Well, it just doesn't go away, does he, Boris? Let's see what my panel make of this. Now they've put their phones down and stop entering competition. I'm going to come to you first on this one, Claire.
Yeah.
Boris, the return of Boris.
Do you know what? Within the Conservative Party ether out there, in terms of the democratic public that vote for Conservatives, he maintains a very loyal following. And he might be the conduit between the backbenchers and the frontbenchers and everything that's going on at the moment. It would also add an extra slice of diversity to Popcorn, Liz Truss's new party. You know?
They didn't think the name through, did they?
They really, really didn't. I mean, it's something that you might order at the cinema. a big pot of popcorn. Mind you, with the way things unfold and the dramas of all the political lives at the moment, it is like watching a movie, stuffing your face with popcorn.
But it
feels
like a disaster movie, that's the problem.
I just wonder what Boris is doing at the moment. I mean, he left. I mean, the only way, is not the case that the only way he can be brought back in is if indeed he was made a Lord, like Cameron was made. So there's lots of machinations going on here. And I just don't know where I sit in it. I'm not surprised by it. I won't be surprised either if he is brought back in to help with the trail, because he's such a bluster and such a, you know, a tour de force for the Conservatives that I think it might actually be welcomed.
He's got this huge personality.
He does.
And we've got the Wellingborough by-election coming up, and a focus group of 7 voters there have said they prefer Boris Johnson to Rishi Sunak.
He's magnetic, and charisma is a rare thing in politics. And the Conservatives do have a number of very good speakers, people like GBNews' own, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Kemi Badenoch, who are also charismatic characters. But I think you're right that Boris Johnson does seem to still have a really good reputation and likeability amongst the base that voted for him in 2019. And obviously there are a lot of people, myself included, who voted for the Conservatives in 2019, now feel extremely disenchanted, disappointed, let down. Part of that is obviously Boris's fault. But at the same time, Rishi Sunak is so completely lacking in, and I hate to be too harsh, but every department, that, you know, it wouldn't be a bad thing if Boris could lend him his charisma. But wherever Boris goes, of course, the typical expected controversy follows, where people just can't stop bringing up Partygate. And so it's likely that he'd continue to be dogged by that for quite some time as well. So it's hard to say what the right thing to do is, but I think Rishi could do with any help he can get.
I mean, Claire, in Rishi's defence, he is quietly getting on with the job. He's not a big personality. He'd be the first person to say that himself. But, Boris is bluff and bluster, but he was also proven to tell lies and, yes, get Brexit done. But, is there more to Rishi deep down than there is actually to Boris?
I think there has to be. In order for the stealth moves in which gave Rishi number 10, the keys to number 10, there clearly is a core of iron there. And whilst I don't think he's the most plausible politician in type, or indeed a great statesman, I think what the Conservative Party need to be thoroughly aware of is what's happening across the pond. We have an American election happening in November.
Oh, yes.
We've got Sleepy Biden ahead of, the Democrats at the moment, sitting there not knowing which country is warring with which country, who he's speaking to, and how on earth his wife is letting him continue with this. Because I'll tell you, if it was my husband, I'd be absolutely affronted and want him away.
Yes.
But then we think, well, Carrie's quite a tour de force. Is there a similar relationship there? Is there a similar power share? I don't know. Anyway, I'm politically homeless. Boris is good entertainment, but I'm sorry, we don't need to be entertained any further. We've got Saturday night TV for that. We need our politicians to pull their trousers up, pull their socks up, pull everything else together and get on with governing this country.
It is a bit like in the States that we don't need a rerun. We need, particularly, on both sides of the House, of course, it would be good. But the Conservative Party need to get an adult at the helm, and
they all do. Look what happened to Keir Starmer today. Wants the unions back in.
I think across the House there, a lack of ideas, a lack of rigour, a lack of
there's a lack of reality,
grown-up thinking, and also the sort of like I was going to say rhetorical skill. We don't want sophists, but we do want people who have an ability to communicate well and clearly and use plain English rather than trying to sort of obfuscate absolutely everything that they say. So I think that the Conservatives need somebody of a really, really high calibre at the helm, and they need to facilitate that actually happening. And we've seen only this week, I think it was Tobias Ellwood talking about not letting the party base actually have the vote when it comes to leader. That would be the absolute opposite of what they need. They need to be listening to the base rather than the sort of like the leadership of the political party.
It's interesting you both mentioned this. We're running out of time, unfortunately, but in the focus group about the by-elections coming up, the person that was organising said, well, to be fair to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, Labour aren't liked either. And the reason the people in the focus group gave is the divided nature of both parties, and that is not good news for any of us. As you say, it's like a horror movie.
It really is,
like,
Dawn.
Where's it ending? Right, OK, we are ending on that note, though. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson. Plenty more coming up in today's show. But first, let's get the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you. It's 1:31. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary is said to be furious over the Ministry of Defence's diversity and inclusivity policy. It's been reported in today's Telegraph that the Army wants to relax security clearance vetting for overseas recruits to boost diversity and inclusion. Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph that he's ready to go to battle over the matter and has ordered a review. He's warned there will be no lowering of security clearance requirements on his watch. According to the paper, the UK's armed forces are looking overseas because they've reportedly failed to hit recruitment targets. 2 people have been arrested after an 8-year-old child was seriously injured in a suspected XL bully attack. The dog bit the child's head in Merseyside yesterday afternoon. The boy's had emergency surgery and remains in a serious but stable condition. Doctors say his injuries are life-changing. Officers seized the dog, which they believe to be an XL bully. A 49-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man have been arrested. They're not related to the child. The departure of the Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales has been cancelled at the last minute. It was about to set sail to replace its sister ship, which was also forced to cancel its deployment due to an issue with the propeller. The £3 billion vessel was to take over leading the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. However, despite people lining the walls of Portsmouth Harbour to watch the 65,000-ton warship, it failed to leave the jetty. And the King has attended church in Sandringham for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty walked alongside Queen Camilla and waved to well-wishers. Last night, King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since the diagnosis announcement. The monarch said such kind thoughts are the greatest comfort and encouragement. Buckingham Palace has said he's facing a form of cancer unrelated to his recent prostate treatment. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now, remember, you can get in touch about all the stories we're discussing today, emailing us at gbviews@gbnews.com or message us on our socials. We're at GBNews. But you're not going to want to miss this. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is to appear exclusively on the GB News People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. Let's hear what he has to say about it, shall we?
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
You heard what the man said. See you there. Tomorrow, 8 p.m, the Prime Minister taking part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. Over the course of the hour, he'll take questions directly from you, the great British public, his voters. Right, OK, but for now, there's lots more coming up on today's show. Nuclear power accounts for around a fifth of the UK's electricity generation. Waste from its production is used in medicine, defence, industry and research. But where will we store the radioactive waste? One small town in Yorkshire could be used as a nuclear dump. Ooh, do you want that in your back garden? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson and you're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Hope you're having a wonderfully relaxing Sunday afternoon. Now, nuclear power accounts for around a fifth of the UK's electricity generation. Waste from its production is used in medicine, defence, industry and research. However, some nuclear waste remains radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years, so it needs to be stored safely and securely. East Yorkshire is now being considered as a potential area to dispose of nuclear waste deep underground, along with sites in Cumbria and Lincolnshire. Our reporter Anna Riley has the full story for us.
South Holderness, a beautiful coastal and farming area of East Yorkshire. Due to the type of rocks below the surface, it's a potential site for a nuclear waste facility. But local campaigner Lynn Massey-Davis is strongly opposed to the plans.
This is a rural economy. It's not an industrial economy. There are places that actually want that, where they've got so-called, and this is their own terminology, not mine, nuclear communities. We are not a nuclear community. We do not want to be a nuclear community. It's not what we need. We need small businesses, we need prosperous farms, we need tourism and leisure, and that's what we need investment in.
The proposed series of vaults and tunnels deep underground or under the sea would safely contain Britain's radioactive waste as it decays over centuries.
When you look around the world at countries that have got nuclear waste, they are adopting deep geological disposal, deep in the ground, for the long-term management, so that we don't have to continue building and replacing surface stores all of the time. And that's really what we're looking for. And it's fairly uniform underneath the South Holderness area.
The facility could bring thousands of jobs to the area, better transport links and millions of pounds in investment. But it will only be built with the consent of the community. A working group's been set up to engage with locals through public events like this one in Withensea. The majority of the waste will come from Sellafield, over 200 miles away.
It could be good if it has the right control. It's whether people, including me, can believe that this is 100% safe.
I do agree they need to put it somewhere, but why here? On a coast where it's eroding ever so quick, a lot faster than anybody ever thought it would.
Properties will be given away. Nobody will want to live near or on top of this facility. It is too dangerous.
Climate Minister and MP for Beverley and Holderness, Graham Stewart, is calling for a referendum on the scheme.
I'm going to campaign until I can get the assurance from them that they guarantee a plebiscite for local people here in Holderness. If we're going to host it, let the people here decide.
Sites in Cumbria and Lincolnshire are also being considered. But development's a long way off. It could take up to 15 years for a final decision. Anna Riley, GB News.
Good report there, isn't it? It's worrying, though. Let's see what my panel make of this one. OK, I'm going to come to you first on this one, Emma. Now, I think it's a bit mean to say NIMBYism not in my backyard, because I wouldn't want that in my backyard either.
No, I completely sympathise with them. I mean, you'd be a bit mad not to be slightly concerned about a nuclear facility being put underneath your local area on your beach, especially they've been talking about coastal erosion, pointing out that it's not an ideal spot for it, that they're maybe not properly considering the local community. They're kind of foisting it onto a deprived area that isn't even nearby to the nuclear plant where this nuclear waste would be coming from. Obviously, if we're going to do this and if we're going to increase nuclear power facilities, we do need a safe way to get rid of nuclear waste. So it does have to go somewhere, but it should be with the consent of communities. And like you say, I don't think it's fair to accuse them of being NIMBYs for having concerns about their local environment and about the implications of it.
Claire, do you think, as Emma just mentioned, because it is a fairly deprived area, no one's going to stick it under the streets of Islington, are they, where many of our politicians live?
Of course not. You know, these are grave societal norms that are going to be disrupted. They have to be disrupted. We have to have the conversation. Why is it always the poorest of society that's walked over, that's stepped over, that's muddied over, and will now be glowing like an advert from Ready Break if the waste isn't contained properly? Now, I was just looking up there because clearly I'm Scottish. Who knew? But we've got Faslane.
You did it really well.
Faslane and Coalport are both nuclear bases in Scotland, and they filter some of the waste into the Firth of Clyde. There's also a report written by Japanese submarine builders, and they've moved away from the nuclear model. Maybe that's something that we should be doing as well. You know, we need to look at better ways, because we all know, OK, the waste you said earlier is into medical research. And
a lot of it is, yeah.
A lot of it is. But there's still this very, very harmful byproduct of nuclear fusion and fission and energy that actually brings together really quite unedifying results.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, we do have to move on. We've run out of time again on that one, but very good points. Lots more coming up on today's show. Now, I like this story. Animal rights campaigners have claimed British fairgrounds should stop featuring horses and other animals on carousels as it encourages exploitation. I'm not making this up, honestly.
You are.
All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson and you're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat. Yep. Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and
So there's quite a high population of ex-service men and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the old tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Hope you're having a wonderful Sunday afternoon out there. Now, brace yourself. Animal rights campaigners have claimed British fairgrounds should stop featuring horses and other animals on carousels, as it encourages exploitation. Yeah, they look really real, don't they? People for the ethical treatment of animals suggest replacing horses with objects which celebrate human achievement. PETA's Elisa Allen said, "It would be wonderful to see UK fairgrounds replace animal-shaped carousel figures with vehicles such as cars, unicycles, tractors, airplanes and rockets, and bulldozers, or more whimsical designs like shooting stars, rainbows or brooms." Brooms? What? Aside from the fact that if you're replacing it with planes and cars and things like that, what about the environment? Come on, emissions. That's just wrong as well, by the way. And brooms. I mean, I feel like a witch at the best of times. Sitting on a broom on a carousel is really not going to help, OK? Any case, I'm treating this story really seriously because it is important. So let's see what my panel, Emma and Claire, think about this. Claire.
You can treat it seriously, but I'm certainly not going to.
Are you going to sit on a broom on a carousel?
There's always room in my broom. Because I'm a witch this week.
Parked outside.
Listen, come on, have you ever heard anything so ridiculous in your life? A kid riding around in a bulldozer in a carousel? There's no harm to these wooden, often plastic, metal horses. I mean, kids love unicorns. They don't want stars. I mean, it's all about the whole allegory of back to, like, the circus element of it, the fun group, the fun fair. I mean, because you feel something isn't right doesn't make it not right. That's not very DEI of that, are they?
You might have hit on something here, Claire, because they are actually mentioning fantastical animals like unicorns. So, I mean, look, you could...
Did you know that the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland?
No.
It's on your passport.
Oh, actually it is.
Yes, it is. It is.
I mean, you know, you could just to save money, you could take the wooden horses, just stick an extra bit of wood on. It's a unicorn.
Crypto Scottish nationalism.
Sort it.
Come on. Don't say that. Don't say that, because Humza Useless will be there now thinking it up. It'll all be made into an SNP trope. Yes.
So, I mean, you know, you want to go and sit on a, I don't know, a tractor maybe instead?
I know that it is serious.
It is, sorry,
because these mad people do take this quite seriously. But you actually took the thought right out of my head there. That you can just imagine the Extinction Rebellion activists would counter this with this is going to... It's like when they renamed the Brecon Beacons because of association of beacons with fumes and fossil fuels. You can imagine how they would retaliate with their own madness. But come on, I mean, it's so silly. And PETA are giving a really bad name to people who really do actually care about animal rights. As I was saying when we weren't on air, you know, I'm a real animal lover, and kids love animals. They love carousels because they are a kind of beautifully created, enchanted version of an animal that they might see. Victorian carousels had things like lions on them and other exotic animals that people wouldn't have seen, and that is what drew people, you know, into them. And they are part of this kind of like carnival, magical, enchanted, imaginary world that children love so much. The idea that this is somehow exploitative, I mean, or it encourages people to be exploitative towards animals because because you're riding them or whatever. I mean, it's just silly, and they are making it. They're very good at getting the headlines, but what they're doing actually, and it's quite serious, is that they are creating an association in people's minds between animal rights activism and being completely loco.
I think that's... No, to be fair, PETA aren't here to defend themselves, OK? I mean, you know, it would...
And this is just opinion.
Of course, this is just opinion. But I must admit, I loved carousels as a kid.
It is funny, though, isn't it?
And it didn't encourage me to abuse horses
no, you don't,
any way, shape or form. No.
And it didn't want me either to be a massive horsewoman, nor does it even infiltrate the fact of the Grand National or anything. It doesn't open up any form of discussion. It's a kid's right.
My favourite one as a child was to ride a chicken. I said that was always
just. I don't know, that says a lot about you, actually, Emma. I'm just looking at a picture here where there's a picture of a carousel and there's a giant.
Yeah, there's a chicken right there. You can just imagine the bulldozer going up and down, can't you? And how ridiculous that would look.
Not quite the same. And what about the environment? I'm sorry.
They're such fun sponges.
I mean, to be fair to them, they are masters at getting people talking about animal rights. So
for all the wrong reasons.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we are talking about it, and if it makes people think, you know, it
makes people think what?
But remember how they did that language guide where they suggested replacing things like to kill two birds with one stone with to feed two birds with one scone. They are control freaks, and
you say scone, I say scone.
It doesn't rhyme.
You go down that road.
It's so Scotophobic of them.
We started on the scone debate. And do you do
jam first or cream first?
Jam or cream first. Right, OK, neither PETA or the scones are here to defend themselves, so let's leave that one there, shall we? You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson. Lots more coming up on today's show. But first, let's take a look at what the weather's doing with Jonathan.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. This morning's cloud, mist and fog is slowly clearing its way off to provide more in the way of sunnier spells for the rest of the afternoon and even into the next few days. Still got some quite persistent rain across the Northern Isles, a very wet end to Sunday for Shetland, and also some quite frequent showers for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland turning wintry over higher ground areas throughout tonight. But elsewhere there are some clear spells in between those showers. Underneath those clear skies, though, temperatures will take a little bit of a tumble down into low single figures for many of us. A patchy frost in rural spots, maybe some icy stretches around first thing in the morning. But generally Monday is a day of sunshine and showers. Those showers will be most frequent over towards the north and west with some quite blustery winds around at times. Those towards the east and the south, though, more likely to stay drier and actually a fairly pleasant, fine day with a decent number of sunny intervals in there. Temperatures generally ranging between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius, which is around where we'd expect them to be for this point in the year. On Tuesday, we still have this area of low pressure in the far north, bringing again a breezy, blustery picture with some showers. But this ridge of high pressure elsewhere will allow for a slightly finer, drier start with some sunny spells once again. But really, all eyes will be turning to this area in the southwest as we see cloud thicken and outbreaks of rain eventually arrive throughout the day. And that will increasingly spread further to other areas of the UK as we head throughout the middle point of the week. But also some milder air trapped into that. So temperatures are generally going to be on an upwards climb. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Now, lots more coming up on today's cracking show. Housing Secretary Michael Gove has insisted no-fault evictions in England will be outlawed by the next general election. Will this hard talk be enough to salvage the Tories' election push? All of that and much, much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and you're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have two SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had two brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you can run down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
Yeah, the growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have, the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Sunday. Thank you for joining on this Sunday lunchtime. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I'm Dawn Neeson, and for the next hour I'll be keeping you company on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, a cracking show coming up for you in this hour. Housing Secretary Michael Gove has insisted no-fault evictions in England will be outlawed by the next general election. Will this hard talk be enough to salvage the Tories' election push, though? Then, the majority of people in Ireland are in favour of tougher rules on immigration to reduce the large numbers coming into a country struggling with a housing crisis. But is the EU to blame for their border crisis? And one smart motorway with a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit imposed to lower pollution has netted the Treasury almost £12 million over 4 years. Are we sure these smart motorways aren't just cash cows? Even more exciting, you're not going to miss this. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is to appear exclusively on the GB News People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
So many questions. That's right, at 8 p.m. tomorrow, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. Over the course of the hour, he'll take questions directly from you, the great British public, his voters. This show is nothing without you and your views, so don't just keep them for Rishi. I want to hear them as well. Let me know your thoughts on all of the stories we're discussing today. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.com or message me on our socials. We're at GB News. But first, let's catch up with the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you and good afternoon. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary is said to be furious over the Ministry of Defence's diversity and inclusivity policy. It's been reported in today's Telegraph that the Army wants to relax security clearance vetting for overseas recruits to boost diversity and inclusion. Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph that he's ready to go to battle over the matter and has ordered a review. He's warned that there will be no lowering of security clearance requirements on his watch. According to the paper, the UK's armed forces are looking overseas because they've reportedly failed to hit recruitment targets. Fujitsu is said to have received more than £3.4 billion through contracts from Treasury-linked organisations despite its role in the Post Office scandal. The Commons Treasury Committee says Fujitsu was awarded around £1.4 billion worth of deals since the High Court ruling in 2019, concluding there'd been numerous failings in its Horizon IT system. £2 billion worth of contracts were also agreed before 2019 and remained active thereafter. A group of MPs wrote to organisations, including HMRC, the Financial Conduct Authority and the Bank of England, to demand details of their agreements with Fujitsu. The committee said all three have spent considerable sums with them. 2 people have been arrested after an 8-year-old child was seriously injured in a suspected XL bully attack. The dog had bitten the child's head in Merseyside yesterday afternoon. The boy's had emergency surgery and remains in a serious but stable condition. Doctors say his injuries are life-changing. Officers seized the dog, which they believe to be an XL bully. A 49-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man have been arrested. They're not related to the child. The Housing Secretary is warning young people shut out of the UK's housing market could turn to authoritarianism. Michael Gove says a failure by the government to tackle the housing crisis could harm democracy, as well as the Conservatives' chances at the general election. In an interview with The Times, he says the traditional route for young people to work hard and get on the housing ladder has gone. Gove criticised Labour for, he says, continuously rejecting housing policies.
The difference between a party saying that its policy is pro-builder, not blocker, and then when we bring things forward, every single Conservative MP, every single Conservative I know backed our proposals for new homes, and Labour were whipped to a man and woman against it. So this is not about individuals, this is about a party that makes big claims, and yet, as we see time after time, it turns turtle. And that's why Keir Starmer is the jellyfish of British politics. He's transparent, spineless, swept along by the tide.
The departure of the Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales has been cancelled at the last minute. It was about to set sail to replace its sister ship, which was also forced to cancel its deployment due to an issue with the propeller. The £3 billion vessel was to take over leading the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. However, despite people lining the walls of Portsmouth Harbour to watch the 65,000-tonne warship, it failed to leave the jetty. 124 migrants crossed the English Channel yesterday on 3 small boats, according to newly released Home Office figures. The latest arrivals brings the total for the year to just over 1,500. That's down from 2,072 at the same time last year, but up from the figure in 2022. Apart from the latest crossings yesterday and on Thursday, small boats had not been intercepted since January the 31st. The Prime Minister has made stopping the boats a key pledge of his leadership as the country approaches a general election. Well, Kwasi Kwarteng says immigration must be a key focus for the government when it comes to having success at the next election. The former Chancellor also told GB News' Camilla Tominey show his decision to not stand for re-election as an MP is one he's been considering for a while.
Thinking about it for a long time.
Have you? How long?
And there was, well, ever since the beginning of the Parliament, actually. I had thought, and I was Minister of State at that point, I had thought that, 3 terms, obviously we had more elections, but 15 years is probably, in this modern climate, a reasonable amount of time to be an MP. 2 of the principal things that Conservatives should be fighting for are lower taxes and secure borders, strong on immigration and strong on taxes.
Well,
and
would
if
you
look
like
at
to see an immigration cap?
Yes, I mean, there's got to be something on it. I mean, on 2 of those metrics, we haven't, frankly, performed very well.
No. And the King has attended church in Sandringham for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty walked alongside Queen Camilla and waved to well-wishers. Last night, King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since the diagnosis announcement. The monarch said such kind thoughts are the greatest comfort and encouragement. Buckingham Palace has said he's facing a form of cancer related to his recent prostate treatment. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now let's get straight into today's topics. Lots of you have been sending in your thoughts already. Obviously, really, some very strong opinions out there, particularly on the Army diversity drive. Darren, good afternoon. Darren says, while you are training for diversity and inclusion, someone else is training for war. When you meet, they will win. Very interesting point. Lots of you agreeing with that sort of viewpoint as well. Bruce says, good afternoon, Bruce. So what happens when you hire a few wrong-uns from abroad to fill your quota and the first time they get live ammunition, they turn on their own recruits, killing God knows how many? Boris is also getting your backs up or your backs down, depending on which side you're sitting on this one. James said, I will vote for Tories if Boris is back involved. He should never have been removed. Meanwhile, Brian, good afternoon, Brian says, Boris had an 80-seat majority and did nothing with it. Sunak and the Tories will get wiped out at the election, even with Boris's help. Very strong opinions there. Keep them coming in, though, at GB Views, at GB News on your screen now. You can see it. Now, let's carry on talking politics, shall we? Housing Secretary Michael Gove has insisted no fault evictions in England will be outlawed by the next general election. The Conservatives promised in 2019 to end the right of landlords to evict tenants without needing a reason. But the government has previously said a ban cannot be enacted until the court system is improved. Campaigners have raised concerns about court reforms could take years, leaving renters still facing unfair evictions. Earlier on GB News, Mr Gove was on the Camilla Tominey show, also explaining how he believes net migration was affecting the housing market. Here's what he had to say.
Earlier this week, I was talking to a House of Lords committee about it, and I made the point that we are currently seeking to deliver 300,000 homes a year. We've delivered 2.5 million since 2010, but obviously with new people arriving, that puts pressure on housing stock. So that's why it's so important that we get a handle on both legal and illegal migration as well.
OK, and Camilla, if you can catch up on Camilla's interview, do so. She didn't give me an easy time. It's a cracking interview there. Now, joining me now is political commentator Benedict Spence to delve down into what Michael Gove had to say to Camilla this morning and also what he said in an interview in the Sunday Times today. Benedict, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Benedict, what do you make of what Michael Gove has had to say today?
I mean, on the subject of no-fault evictions, it's one of those things that I think sounds very nice in principle. And if you want to sort of live in a high-trust society, I think that it's a good thing, ultimately, if you're sort of having lots of people moving. Ultimately, this is about people moving to urban centres. Freudian slip, we don't have industrial centres in this country anymore. People moving to urban centres, being able to work and knowing that there is an element of security to them if they can't, in fact, get on the housing ladder, which is is the case for a lot of people. You know, in countries like Germany, for example, you have a culture of sort of long-term renting. People don't necessarily feel the need to buy their houses, to sort of desperately scrabble to do so, because there are rules in place and they understand actually that they are protected up to a point. They're not going to be evicted, and often they can stay there for decades at a time. But it's not really one of the key issues. It's sort of fiddling around the edges slightly. We are not currently facing a wave of people being evicted en masse through no fault of their own. Actually, this is something that isn't affecting the vast majority of people. The key thing, as has been alluded to in the Sunday Times interview, in the interview with Camilla Tominey, is that there simply aren't enough houses to go around. The government has also proceeded with this course of mass migration legally, to boost the labour market and to suppress wages. That is also having an awful effect where you're seeing a massive increase for demand for housing whilst wages are also going down because there are so many people coming in. So it's one of those things that I think people will go, oh yeah, that sounds nice, but A, as you say, it's going to take a long time for it to be implemented because of the legal system in this country, and B, it simply doesn't solve the issue. And I'm afraid we hear this time and time again from the Conservatives throughout the 14 years that they've been in power. They have done nothing to address the fundamental issues that face the housing market in this country. At local level, they continue to insist that houses are not built anywhere. They insist that it's all about protecting the green belts. And this is why I think they are going to lose. This is one of the prominent reasons why they're going to lose the general election, because this affects things. But it's also why they're going to stay locked out of power, because a generation of people who currently won't vote for them, but might have been persuaded to if they had a stake in society, will not have that stake in society.
I thought one of the strongest lines today, Benedict, was basically Michael Gove saying that the young are so disenfranchised, they're either not going to vote or vote for an extremist. Now, interesting terminology there, but so, you know, people under 40 are not that happy with either the Conservative Party or the Labour Party. So a lot of what Michael Gove was saying was trying to get those people on board, but do you think what he said has achieved that?
A lot of the where this comes from is that there's a lot of polling that suggests that young people would like to see a strong leader in charge of a country like Britain, and that democracy isn't necessarily so important as long as you get that strong leader. And this is always framed, I'm afraid, by people who rely on the democratic system and weak political institutions as fascism or communism on the march. It's on the rise. If we are not careful, we might lose this system that is routinely failing people. To which the average young person will probably go, well, yeah, that's why you're going to lose it. It's not because we've all become fascists overnight. It's because actually you people don't do anything, and you're the only people we have to vote for. But I think you're right there to point out that it's a question of both Labour and Conservative. Even though the Labour Party have a huge lead at the moment, nobody is especially enthusiastic about them, because they're not particularly enthusiastic. They are scared of their own shadow because of the Corbyn years. They are very hesitant to come up with any sort of major gamble sort of policy that might inspire people in case it goes the wrong way. And I think that's more what people want, is a politician who will promise you something, has a vision, and will then see it through, rather than the Tory party, which has no vision and says, sorry, but Labour are worse, and the Labour Party that promise you something and then row back on it the second there is any sign of unhappiness with it.
Alleluia to that. I think you've actually nailed it there. Thank you very much. That's Benedict Spence, political commentator on Michael Gove's lots of talk this morning, both to Camilla and in the Sunday Times interview about housing reform, how they're going to build more houses. I mean, they were officially committed to building 300,000 homes a year by the mid-2020s, and they're struggling to do 240,000, to be honest with you. But I'm going to come to you first on this one, Emma. Michael Gove saying what he's trying to do, I think, is get the young on board, to get the young to vote for the Conservatives. Do you think anything he said about housing reform and you know, sort of like toughening up on landlords is going to have that effect?
I think he's right and he's wrong. So I think he's right that if young people don't have a stake in society, they're not able to own their own homes, start families, have that kind of security where they feel rooted in a particular place, that is a huge problem for society, for social cohesion. It's not a good thing for populations to be transient, particularly when we have so much mass migration as well, which is putting pressure on the housing market. So it's this whole sort of mess of different issues all rolled into this. So yes, I think he's right in that sense that young people might vote for extreme candidates if they feel that democracy is broken and that they're not being heard via proper democratic routes and processes. On the other hand, I think that actually landlords have a rough time of it. There's a reason why people are feeling discouraged to become landlords in order to let properties. You need people to own properties so that people can rent. And of course, we do want to have people being able to buy their own homes, but you also do need to have a rental market, and you need to have a rental market that's fair for both the tenant and also for the landlords, because many landlords can end up with tenants stuck in their properties for a very long time. And I think we think of landlords as being these sort of rich, sort of like Mr. Moneybags from the Monopoly board, when in fact landlords are very often normal people. It might be their only investment, it might be their pension. And so it's not right to penalise people who have worked very hard in order to own properties that they then
But the
rent.
people who are paying for those properties are working very hard to pay for them for the landlord. So I'm afraid I'm quite anti-landlord. And I do think within a transient community, especially a big city like London, we do need a rental market. But I would prefer if the companies that were employing the people who needed to rent were paying for, had actually ownership of those flats. And I feel for young teachers who are trying to strive, working in big cities, because they don't have the London waiting allowance outside on the peripheral of Greater London, and yet we require such a high level of educated person to go and teach children in order for the children to grow exponentially, grow physically, grow intelligently. And if we can't have that, then what's going to happen? Because I fear that landlords are in it to make profit. They're not just content with their mortgage being paid, they actually want the incremental balance of the growth of the property as well. And I think the fundamental right is shelter, and I can't stand people that profit off of the back of that.
I also think it's a very valuable proposal to put certain penalties on people who foreign buyers who are buying up property and real estate here in the UK as an investment, because I think particularly in London, there are parts of London that have been hollowed out. There are no people living in those
London,
areas.
Emma, as you were well known, the lights are out post 6 o'clock.
And actually,
there's no one living there.
I was inspired by a tweet by Charlotte Gill, who was responding to somebody else, and lots of people have been discussing this online about the ways in which house prices have risen over a very short period of time, quite dramatically, so that people who are in their 20s now face an almost impossible uphill struggle to get on the property ladder. And it's not been that long since I was looking in the local area where I grew up, where house prices were, not unreasonable, but not as high as central London, but still quite far outside of central London. And I thought, I wonder what the house prices are around there. So I put in actually quite a high bracket to search for properties in that area for a one-bedroom flat. And even within that reasonably high threshold, there was almost nothing. Because even a one-bedroom flat more than an hour outside of London is so completely unaffordable. So we do have a really big problem on our hands, but I think we have to be careful not to penalise hard-working landlords, because they're not all big companies, they're not all just out for profit.
There's a very, very small minority
and
of
we
them
need
that are.
landlords, we do need
Did you know that the stress test to be a landlord in a buy-to-let mortgage is only on what the property will be worth when it's rented out, not on your income? So there's a complete fallacy here as well. I mean, if there were less landlords, there would be more houses. The more houses, simple law of supply and demand, prices would fall.
But do you think, Gove is playing a dangerous game here? Because, many landlords are, by their nature, going to be Conservative voters. So if he's cracking down on the landlords, he's going to potentially alienate that vote.
Oh, I couldn't care less, to be honest with you.
I mean, you
really
would also
couldn't.
you would presume that homeowners would also, people who want to own homes would be more likely to vote Conservative as well. But I think ultimately, Benedict is right that it is fiddling around the edges. And actually, the real elephant in the room is mass migration, because that's what's putting pressure on houses and services.
Yes, absolutely. That is the elephant in the room, and we can't talk about that because it makes you automatically racist. Yes. Right, we have to move on. But for more analysis and opinion on that particular story, go to our website, gbnews.com, where everything we're talking about today and loads more stories are being debated on there right now. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson. Lots more coming up on today's show. Now, the majority of people in Ireland are in favour of tougher rules on immigration to reduce the large numbers coming to a country struggling with a housing crisis. Just been talking about it here, haven't we? But is it the EU's blame for this border crisis? All of that and much more coming up. You're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Now, crossing the Irish Sea to the Emerald Isle, the majority of people in Ireland are in favour of tougher rules on immigration to reduce the large numbers coming into the country, which is already struggling with a housing crisis. You've heard us speak about it on here already. Almost 60% of Irish voters want a more closed policy, and this is unusual, they've never been like this before, with tensions over immigration building in Ireland ahead of a general election expected this year. And there have been anti-migrant riots, protests and even arson attacks. Now, this is unusual. Remember, Ireland is part of the EU still. What do you make of this story? I mean, there are quite shocking statistics involved, Claire, aren't they?
Well, there are, but hardly surprising given the terror attacks that happened in Dublin a good while ago. But Leo Varadkar as well, the President Taoiseach of Ireland, he's in a very precarious position, I would say, because he is a member state of the EU. But then to want tougher borders, where are these illegal immigrants coming from? Because they're not coming via the north. They're not coming from Belfast and crossing that way. So where are they coming from? How do they get there? And lots of Irish Republicans do not want the north to be encapsulated back into the south because of reasons, not only because of the religious divide, take that away, I'm not making that as a point at the moment, is because they don't want the burden of power and the burden of supporting those from the north to implement them within their social services network, their health network as well. And I'm afraid it's actually good news because they're actually focusing on something that we feel very, very concisely about in this country, is about the high levels of immigration and what we can do to do it, what we can do to solve it, where we can put them. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the housing to support the numbers that are coming in. And it's all very well for the lefty lefts to wave their flag and saying, oh, let's invite everyone in. This is where it's not just our shores. I'm sorry, but charity does start at home, Dawn. And I think we have to realise there's a load of disenfranchised population out there, and that will come, the time will come when we're going out to vote, and we will vote, hopefully, with our feet and show the Conservative Party, show the Labour Party, show, in fact, every political party how we're feeling. Because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And for Ireland to be quite it's got a lot of parity in its views, in its policies. For them now, for the Irish people now to start saying, we think we've got a problem with this. I think the optic is we've all got a problem with it and we all need to address it.
And this is the surprise here, though, isn't it, Emma? I mean, between April 2022 and 23, 141,600 immigrants entered Ireland, the highest since it peaked in 2007. And that's just almost a 2% population increase. And many of these migrants are, as we've seen on our own shores, young, single men, suddenly in an Irish small town where there aren't the facilities for them, they're not working, they're bored. So, you know, it's understandable that people are worried. And it's not just Ireland we're seeing this. There is, across Europe, this now anti-migrant feeling.
I think you must be psychic, Dawn, because you're
reading your mind.
Stealing all of my thoughts from my head.
We're in sync.
Look, these numbers are huge, and it is the same case across Europe, and it's so noticeable in Ireland as well, particularly in cities that are in rural areas where it's very noticeable that the population has changed quite dramatically in a very short space of time. And it's not just illegal migration. This is also legal migration. This is also the refugees that they've taken in without the infrastructure to support them, including Ukrainian refugees, many of whom have been also sent to rural areas. And as Claire mentioned as well, there was this case late last year where an Algerian migrant stabbed 3 school children and a teacher. And I think it's very difficult for us in the UK to understand the way that politics works in the Republic of Ireland, because it doesn't have the same sort of left-right binary as we have here. And so actually, Leo Varadkar, who is ostensibly on the of a centre-right party, complaining at the time when there were these riots in response to this stabbing, saying that people, rather than addressing the real problem, he was saying that people were afraid of the far right who were protesting. That was a very strange way to frame things, because actually, as well, in the context of Northern Irish politics, the ruling party are now looking at a loss because of this, and actually Sinn Féin are further ahead in the polls because even though they're a left-wing party, they are a nationalist party, and they are actually the hardest on migration.
The irony.
Yeah, so actually, it's all rather complicated, and I think in the UK it's very difficult for us to understand. But this is a real problem in Ireland, and it's going to be the main subject on which the next election is decided.
It was very interesting when that attack, the Algerian man, as you mentioned, who allegedly, the case is still going through, stabbed 3 school children and a teacher in Dublin. He was described as an Irish citizen because he is an Irish citizen, but the press at the time initially didn't report the fact that he was an Algerian migrant. So, again, we have to move on. Again, a very, very strong opinions on that one. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson. Lots more coming up on today's show, but first, here's the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you. It's 2:31. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary is said to be furious over the Ministry of Defence's diversity and inclusivity policy. It's been reported in today's Telegraph that the Army wants to relax security clearance vetting for overseas recruits to boost diversity and inclusion. Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph that he's ready to go to battle over the matter and has ordered a review. He's warned there'll be no lowering of security clearance requirements on his watch. According to the paper, the UK's armed forces are looking overseas because they've reportedly failed to hit recruitment targets. The department of the Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales has been cancelled at the last minute. It was about to set sail to replace its sister ship, which was also forced to cancel its deployment due to an issue with the propeller. The £3 billion vessel was to take over leading the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. However, despite people lining the walls of Portsmouth Harbour to watch the 65,000-tonne warship, it failed to leave the jetty. 124 migrants crossed the English Channel yesterday on 3 small boats, according to new Home Office figures. The latest arrivals brings the total for the year to just over 1,500. That's down from the 2,072 at the same time last year, but up from the figure in 2022. Apart from the latest crossings, small boats had not been intercepted since January the 31st. The Prime Minister has made stopping the boats a key pledge of his leadership as the country approaches a general election. And the King has attended church in Sandringham for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty walked alongside Queen Camilla and waved to well-wishers. Last night, King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since the diagnosis announcement. The monarch said such kind thoughts are the greatest comfort and encouragement. Buckingham Palace has said he's facing a form of cancer unrelated to his recent prostate treatment. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now, remember, you can get in touch about all the stories we've been discussing today by emailing me at gbviews or at gbnews.com or message me on our socials at gbnews. And you're not going to want to miss this one. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is to appear exclusively on the GB News People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. Let's hear what he has to say, shall we?
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
That's right, tomorrow at 8 p.m, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. Over the course of the hour, he'll take questions directly from you, the great British public, or voters as he likes to call you. I'm Dawn Neeson and you're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
So the highway code was amended recently. Passed me by, but anyway, a new poll suggests this has made no difference to the safety of road users, and I could believe that.
Yeah, there was an awful crash in London, wasn't there? A bus and a pedestrian yesterday.
Fatality.
So we're asking, is the highway code fit for purpose, or should we just scrap it altogether? That's our debate this morning, and we're joined by Danny Kelly. She argues highways are not fit for purpose, and cycling instructor Anna Hughes thinks they are. Good morning to you both.
You see, Anna, I think it's a good thing. I think the highway code is a good thing. I just don't think that any of us pay any attention to it, or we should all be tested on it quite regularly, I would have thought. We should have revision courses in it.
Yeah, I think you just summed it up, Eamon, by saying the changes passed you by. I actually asked a few of my fellow cyclists and pedestrians, what is classified as vulnerable road users, about this very thing. I said, has the new highway code made things safer for you? And most people said, not at all. Drivers don't know what it is. They don't know what the changes are. They probably don't know what the rules are to start with. And as you've just said, doing refreshers is a really good idea. It's a bit bizarre that we're given a license to operate this quite dangerous machinery, and then we're never tested again, and especially not on the highway code, which is, especially when it changes, why wouldn't we be retested on that or have to do refresher courses on it? You know, there are conflicts on the road, there are fatalities. It makes sense to be aware of what the highway code says, because it is there to keep us safe.
Yeah, Danny Kelly, when I think back, I think it was 1999 I passed my driving test. Hardly any bikes on the road then, to be honest, probably virtually none.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, the push for diversity is seeing military bosses recruiting from overseas to hit targets. Our national security is becoming national insanity. In My Take a 10, young people have got nowhere to live and no hope. If we don't start building houses, and fast, this country is finished. Plus Anne Widdecombe, John Sargent and my top pundits. We're live from 9.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Now, a vigil is being held today to mark the anniversary of Brianna Ghey's murder. Brianna was on this day last year with two teenagers having been found guilty of a murder by Manchester Crown Court last December. Joining me now is GB News North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper. Hello, Sophie. I mean, it's just awful, tragic story. It really is. And, you know, your hearts go out to Brianna's mum and dad. What's happening where you are at the moment?
Well, in around 20 minutes' time, we're expecting that vigil to begin here in Warrington, of course, marking the one-year anniversary since Brianna Ghey's murder, which took place just a few miles down the road in Culcheth Linear Park. She was lured there under the pretence of taking drugs by a girl she thought was her friend, Scarlett Jenkinson, and her accomplice, Eddie Ratcliffe. Just over a week ago, the pair was sentenced to life in prison. They will serve serve a minimum of 22 and 20 years respectively before they'll be considered for release. They lured her to the park, as I say, under the pretense of taking drugs, where they would then stab her 28 times with a hunting knife. Now, this is a case that truly rocked not only Warrington, but the entirety of the UK. And you can tell that by the turnout today. Already a couple of hundred people gathered here in Market Square in Warrington ahead of that vigil. People already starting to lay out bouquets of flowers, candles, balloons, even, I'm sure you can see there, a really rather beautifully painted portrait of Brianna. Members of her family are expected to attend here today. We are expecting to hear from Brianna's mother, Esther. I'm sure that will be an incredibly emotive speech that she will give in memory of her daughter 1 year on from her murder. We are also hearing that we could well hear from a representative from Brianna's school, of course the school that Scarlett Jenkinson, her murderer, also attended. We could well also hear from a local MP, and we're also hearing that there could be a choir from Brianna's school that will perform here today. So it is sure to be incredibly emotional, incredibly raw, and people just remembering Brianna on a day 1 year on from her brutal and horrific murder.
Sophie Reaper in Warrington there for us. Thank you very much for the memorial to Brianna Ghey and thoughts with all her friends and families this afternoon. Obviously 1 year on from her horrific murder. Now, lots more coming up on today's show. One smart motorway with a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit imposed to lower pollution has netted the Treasury almost £12 million over 4 years. Are we entirely sure these smart motorways aren't just cash cows, though? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and you're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Now, before we move on, it's time for the Great British Giveaway, and you could win £18,000 in totally tax-free cash to spend however you like. Sounds brilliant. Fancy the chance to make it yours? Well, here's how you do it.
We want to turn 2024 into 2020 more with your chance to win £18,000 in cash to spend however you like. You really could be the next big winner of our Great British Giveaway. Phil from West Yorkshire won our last one.
I never won a penny in my life.
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, wow.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Wow, that's brilliant, isn't it? Right, get entering now. You could win it, £18,000. What could you do with that? Right, now, it turns out that smart motorways are great for business. Who'd have thought it, eh? One smart motorway with a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit imposed to lower pollution has netted millions of pounds in fines for the Treasury, with 22,500 motorists fined for speeding on just a 2.6-mile stretch of the M1 near Sheffield over 4 years. It means that the 18-mile stretch of the M1 made almost 12 million or £8,000 a day over 4 years. Cash cow indeed. Let's see what my marvellous panel make of this one. Claire. Now, this is all to do for the environment, cleaner air, etc.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No, it's not. Dawn, it's not.
I tried.
It's not. It's not. What it's doing is slowing vehicles down to use it as a form of contraflow. Contraflow, the M1's like a car park. Most roads now are like car parks. And what's that doing? The engines are running, the emissions are there, that ain't changing. What they are doing, though, is when that is the case, they're using that data to show some stupid scientific evidence to support these not-so-very smart motorways, in my view. It's ridiculous.
I think you should sit on the fence more, Claire. I mean, I'm never quite sure what you think on any given subject.
It's just, what are they doing with that £8,000 a day? Where is that going?
Yeah, it's potholes.
Potholes?
No, thinking not. Emma.
Well, I think Claire and I are sitting on the same side of the fence on this. I mean, it's obviously it's a scam. It's like all of these sorts of measures, the same as ULEZ. It's obviously not better for emissions because it's causing traffic to back up and whatnot in the case of ULEZ. And the smart motorways, and as we were discussing off air, Dawn, I wasn't entirely sure what I was missing.
I love the fact that
they're
called...
don't drive,
I
don't drive, no. So the fact that they're called smart motorways, I thought there must be something to this other than the fact they don't have a hard shoulder. Turns out not. They're actually just dangerous because they don't have a hard shoulder.
Yes,
exactly. Lots of people died as a result of this. And of course, being able to sort of as they have done on this particular stretch of road that's turned out to be such a moneymaker, taking the speed limit down from 70 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour, which of course is going to trick a lot of people who often use that road and have been driving at it at 70 miles an hour for however long that road has existed. And you see this all the time where they change the speed limits on various roads. And of course that's going to catch people out. But you see it particularly with a lot of these so-called environmental policies, where they are really just functioning as a kind of piggy bank, milking the public and lining the pockets of local authorities and so on. Sorry for being so cynical, but...
Because you're cynical doesn't make you wrong, Emma.
Team cynical here. I think my favourite quote in this entire story is I asked whether the 60-mile-an-hour trial had actually improved air quality. Stephen Elderkin, National Highways Director of Environmental Sustainability, that's a job title and a half, isn't it, says, we are working hard to finalise the analysis of the...
Bet they are. Bet they are.
And we'll publish the reports in due... I bet you can't wait for those reports.
Oh, I really can't wait. Girt those loins, girls. The report is coming.
But the thing is, I mean...
It's got such a long job title as well. It's a lot of hot air to breathe out to say it. You'd think he'd want to get an acronym in there to try and save some energy.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to
come up with an acronym. Not more acronyms, thank you very much.
We wouldn't be struck off from Ofcom.
But the thing is, I mean, the thing is with smart motorways, they're not used as a cash cow. They are dangerous. Many people have lost their lives on them, and there is a campaign group against them as well. And who came up with the idea? In what world does it make sense?
I know.
So I'm not a driver, so maybe you can explain this to me, but I don't understand the rationale behind a smart motorway, because surely you need, for safety reasons, as the campaigners are claiming, because it seems quite obvious to me, surely you need a hard shoulder on motorways. What benefit can there possibly be to, especially if you can't drive any faster on a smart motorway because the speed limit's reduced. So I don't really understand what the rationale is behind it, other than the fact that they seem to be unsafe. I can't see any benefits.
You see, on the one hand, they're saying it's for it's like a form of contraflow, as I was saying earlier, because of the increased volume of traffic. They then take away the need for the hard shoulder not to be used, therefore allowing drivers to use it. But of course, the hard shoulder is there for a really good reason. In case people breakdown or in case of accident and emergency, there is safety then on the roads. They've actually removed road safety.
I mean,
and completely diminished it.
As usual, they are not here to defend themselves, but a government spokesman has said that speeding on any road is dangerous, which is why we have strict laws in place against it, and fines help to enforce those laws. But we are recognising public concerns, and we have cancelled new smart motorways, and we're investing $900 million for safety improvements, including progressing the construction of 150 extra emergency areas. So I think someone somewhere has realised that smart motorways are pretty stupid.
Pretty dumb.
The cars that are being driven now reach so many targets in terms of safety that it's actually quite difficult if you're in the car to have, to suffer any form of trauma in the car, but also on streets. They're made to such a high standard now that if you, because of the LTNs and because of other low traffic things, i.e. you can't move, that people hit by them are more likely not to have suffered any serious injury.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're running out of time on this show. Lots of hot air in this room today. It's been brilliant, great debates. But don't go anywhere, because Nana is up next, and Nana has a cracking show. Nana, what have you got coming up?
Well, of course, very sad that it's the anniversary of the death of Brianna Ghey. So we'll be talking a little bit about the fact that it was mentioned, Keir Starmer brought it up in the Houses of Commons during the Prime Minister's questions. And actually, was he wrong to do that? Was he wrong to conflate the two issues? So there's still a lot of talk about that, and it has brought the conversation about whether Rishi was being transphobic up, which, we'll be discussing that. Also, Tucker Carlson, I don't know whether you watched it, but he interviewed Putin, and there's a lot of talk now saying that he's, it's a popularity kind of thing, and he's drawn attention to Putin in a positive light for Putin, and it's propaganda win for Putin. But was he right to interview Putin? I thought it was a very interesting interview. A bit boring at the start when he went on about the Russian historical context of everything. Then we're going to be looking at Abdul Azidi and asking whether you believe he's actually in the river, or whether the police are trying to excuse themselves for not being able to find him as more and more comes to light. But there's loads coming up in the show. We've got a great guest and loads of stuff.
Sounds a very brilliant watch indeed. Well, you've been watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson. I just want to thank Claire Muldoon and Emma Webb for being a brilliant guest this afternoon. But don't go anywhere, because Nana's up next. Thank you for watching. Have a lovely rest of your weekend. Stay tuned for Nana. But let's have a look at what the weather's doing first, shall we? Thank you very much, and have a fantastic rest of your Sunday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. This morning's cloud, mist and fog is slowly clearing its way off to provide more in the way of sunnier spells for the rest of the afternoon and even into the next few days. Still got some quite persistent rain across the Northern Isles, a very wet end to Sunday for Shetland, and also some quite frequent showers for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, turning wintry over higher ground areas throughout tonight. But elsewhere there are some clear spells in between those showers. Underneath those clear skies, though, temperatures will take a little bit of a tumble down into low single figures for many of us. A patchy frost in rural spots, maybe some icy stretches around first thing in the morning. But generally Monday is a day of sunshine and showers. Those showers will be most frequent over towards the north and west, with some quite blustery winds around at times. Those towards the east and the south, though, more likely to stay drier, and actually a fairly pleasant, fine day with a decent number of sunny intervals in there. Temperatures generally ranging between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius, which is around where we'd expect them to be for this point in the year. On Tuesday, we still have this area of low pressure in the far north, bringing again a breezy, blustery picture with some showers. But this ridge of high pressure elsewhere will allow for a slightly finer, drier start with some sunny spells once again. But really, all eyes will be turning to this area in the southwest as we see cloud thicken and outbreaks of rain eventually arrive throughout the day. And that will increasingly spread further to other areas of the UK as we head throughout the middle point of the week. But also some milder air trapped into that, so temperatures are generally going to be on an upwards climb. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course the election is in November. By then the crossings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boats, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's the kind of, they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with